Welcome to Guts and Guns.
Today we're tackling a really big one, a truly fascinating subject, the Roman Empire.
Huge topic.
Exactly. We're going to look at how it rose, its incredible expansion, but also dig into why it eventually fell apart, at least in the West.
And crucially, how its legacy is still, well, all around us today. The sources we've got cover everything: history, economics, politics, tech.
A real mix. And our mission, as always, is to try and cut through all that complexity.
Yeah, basically pull out the key insights. We want you to understand not just what went down, but why it matters. Sort of the aha moments without getting totally bogged down in dates and names.
Right. Quick but deep. Okay, let's dive in. So the beginning. How did Rome become this powerhouse? We're talking republic to empire.
Well, you have the traditional founding story, 753 BCE, Romulus and Remus.
The she-wolf, yeah. But the republic starting in 509 BCE, that feels like the real political start, right? After they kicked out the last king.
That's generally seen as the pivotal moment, yeah. They replaced the king with elected officials. Most importantly, these two consuls.
And they could veto each other. That's pretty smart. An early check on power.
It was. And, it wasn't maybe just a simple popular uprising against a tyrant. Some modern thinking suggests it might have been more like an aristocratic takeover, changing how the game was played.
Interesting. So less black and white.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating is how much of Rome's early development came from internal struggles. This conflict between the patricians, the old wealthy families, and the plebeians, the common folk.
That went on for ages, didn't it?
Oh, centuries. But this constant push and pull, it actually forced them to innovate politically. New laws, new rights for plebeians. It shows how internal conflict can actually drive evolution sometimes.
So while they're sorting things out internally, they're also expanding like crazy externally through war, mostly.
Pretty much near constant warfare, yeah. First against their neighbors in Italy, then the big one, the Second Punic War against Carthage.
That was the fight for the Western Mediterranean, wasn't it? Huge stakes.
Absolutely massive. And after that, they turned east, taking on the Hellenistic kingdoms. They just kept going.
But you mentioned something interesting earlier, that this very drive for expansion, this constant warfare, it had a downside.
It absolutely did. Here's the key insight. The competition among the nobles and this reliance on war, while it brought success, it also contained, the seeds of its eventual destruction.
How so?
All these conquests brought in unbelievable wealth, yes, but also vast numbers of enslaved people. This completely warped the Roman economy. Wealthy elites snapped up huge tracts of land, these latifundia, and worked them with cheap slave labor. Your average small farmer, the citizen soldier type, they just couldn't compete.
So they lost their land.
Many did.
Yeah.
And that eroded the traditional base for army recruitment. It created huge inequality and instability simmering beneath the surface. So, the engine of success was also undermining its own foundations.
Wow. It's a real paradox. But that military machine, even with those underlying issues, was something else. Discipline, tactics.
Legendary. Their formations, like the triplex aces, allowed them to rotate fresh troops into battle. And their opening move.
The pila, the heavy javelins.
Exactly. A coordinated volley to disrupt the enemy, break their charge, cause casualties. Then they draw the gladius, the short sword, and go in. Almost like an ancient shock and awe.
Brutally effective.
And adaptable, too. They didn't just rely on heavy infantry. They had auxiliary troops, cavalry, archers, slingers, recruited from across the empire. Good for different terrains, different enemies.
Right. Needed that flexibility for such a huge, diverse empire.
And these soldiers weren't just fighters. They were incredible engineers, building roads, thousands of miles of them, bridges, fortifications.
Those famous Roman roads. And the camps they built often became cities, right?
Many did, yeah. All across Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, this infrastructure was key. And connecting this back, the Roman economy was this massive, intricate thing. It drove the expansion and benefited from it.
Based on land, mainly. Land ownership was power.
Primarily, yes. Agriculture was the core. Those latifundia we mentioned, heavily reliant on slave labor, but also huge trade networks.
Roads helped, but sea transport was even more critical, wasn't it? Ports like Ostia, near Rome.
Absolutely crucial. Shipping grain, wine, oil, metals, all over the Mediterranean. And the government wasn't just passive.
No, they were managing it.
Regulating trade, levying taxes, issuing standardized coins. Augustus later tightened things up, moving tax collection from private contractors, the publicani, to imperial officials. more direct control.
Makes sense. And things like the Annona, the grain dole in Rome, that wasn't just charity, was it?
Oh, definitely not. It was a key political tool. Keep the urban population fed and reasonably happy, keep them loyal. It was about stability and control, as much as welfare.
So these systems are holding things together, but the Republic eventually starts to buckle under the strain, right?
Yeah, the last century or so of the Republic, say from the 130s BCE onwards, was a period of real crisis.
What kind of crisis?
Rampant corruption, political violence becoming normalized. Think about Tiberius Gracchus, a reformer trying to redistribute land, getting assassinated by senators in 133 BCE. That kind of broke a taboo.
So politics got dangerous.
Very. And you start seeing powerful generals emerge who command personal loyalty from their troops, bypassing the state. Men like Marius, Sulla, and then the big names, Caesar, Pompey, Crassus.
The first triumvirate. An alliance of convenience, really.
Which inevitably fell apart, leading to civil war between Caesar and Pompey. Caesar wins, gets himself declared dictator for life.
And then gets assassinated himself in 44 BCE. Ides of March. Trying to restore the Republic, supposedly.
Yeah, but it just led to more civil war, this time between Caesar's heir, Octavian, and Mark Antony, allied with Cleopatra.
Culminating in the Battle of Actium.
31 BCE. Octavian wins decisively. And he was brilliant politically. He carefully gathered all the real power into his own hands, but kept the appearance of the Republic going.
The Senate still met. Elections happened. Sort of.
Exactly. In 27 BCE, he's given the title Augustus, meaning revered one, and becomes the princeps, the first citizen. This is the start of the Principate.
So an empire disguised as a republic.
Pretty much. An absolute monarchy disguised by the forms of a commonwealth, is one historian put it. This marks the end of the Republic and the beginning of the Pax Romana.
The Roman peace. 2 centuries of relative stability. Okay, so that's the rise, but empires fall. Let's shift gears to segment 2, the unraveling of the West.
And the first thing to stress here is, this wasn't like flipping a switch. The fall of the Western Roman Empire wasn't a single event in, say, 476 CE.
Right, that's just a symbolic date, the deposition of the last emperor.
Exactly. It was a long, slow process, centuries long, and incredibly complex, no single cause.
So what's the general understanding now? How do historians frame it?
The dominant view is, well, a combination of things. Deep-seated internal weaknesses met overwhelming external pressures. Basically, Rome gradually lost the core strengths that had made it so powerful. Military effectiveness declined, the economy faltered, population health suffered. These things fed into each other, a kind of downward spiral.
Okay, let's break that down. Internal weaknesses first. The economy, what went wrong there?
By the 3rd century CE, the flow of gold and silver from new conquests had pretty much dried up, but military expenses were still enormous. Defending those vast borders cost a fortune.
So how did they pay for it?
Debasing the currency. They put less precious metal in the coins, which led to massive inflation. People's savings became worthless. Trade became difficult.
And the rich.
Many wealthy landowners retreated to their estates, trying to become self-sufficient, which meant they paid less tax, further starving the central government of funds needed for the army.
Vicious cycle. And you mentioned reliance on slave labor earlier. Did that hurt innovation?
Big time. If you have cheap, readily available muscle power, there's less incentive to invent labor-saving devices or improve agricultural techniques. It kind of stagnated technological development in some areas.
Okay, economic problems. What about politically? You hear about unstable leadership.
Oh, massively unstable. The 3rd century crisis, especially. Between roughly 235 and 284 CE, you had something like 20-plus emperors. Most were assassinated or died in battle.
20 emperors in 50 years. That's chaos.
Utter chaos. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's bodyguards, often just murdered emperors they didn't like and installed their own candidate. At one point, they literally auctioned off the throne to the highest bidder.
You're kidding. They auctioned the emperorship.
Seriously, it completely eroded any sense of civic duty or trust in the government. Why be loyal when the leadership is so corrupt and unstable?
Yeah, you can see that would unravel things. And then they split the empire, east and west.
Diocletian did that in the late 3rd century, initially as a way to manage the huge territory better. 4 rulers, the Tetrarchy. Eventually it solidified into 2 halves, the Latin-speaking West, with its capital often in Rome or Milan or Ravenna.
And the Greek-speaking East, centered on the new capital, Constantinople, founded by Constantine.
Right. The East was generally wealthier, more urbanized, and better able to defend itself. This division, while maybe practical initially, led to diverging interests.
How so?
They started squabbling over resources, military units. And sometimes the Eastern emperors would essentially deflect barbarian invasions westward towards the struggling Western Empire.
So the split weakened the West further?
It certainly didn't help.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting point about the Pax Romana itself. That peace allowed for this incredibly interconnected economy, dependent on trade routes, supporting large cities.
Okay.
But when the political and military systems started to fail, that interconnectedness became a vulnerability. Trade routes broke down, cities couldn't be supplied, they shrank, people fled to the countryside just to survive.
So the system's complexity made its collapse more severe.
In many ways, yes. It wasn't just a political change, it was the disintegration of a whole way of life for many people, a reversion to simpler, more local subsistence economies.
Wow. Okay, so internal decay, political chaos, economic crisis, setting the stage for external pressures, the famous barbarian invasions.
Right. Though migrations might be a better word sometimes. Starting in the late 4th century, you get the Huns moving into Eastern Europe from Central Asia.
And that pushed other groups.
Exactly. It set off a domino effect. Germanic tribes like the Goths, Vandals, Franks, Saxons. Many were pushed towards and across the Roman frontiers, sometimes seeking refuge, sometimes looking for land and opportunity.
And how did Rome handle this influx?
Often very badly. They exploited refugees, broke treaties, which provoked conflict. The Battle of Adrianople in 378, where the Visigoths destroyed a Roman army and killed the Emperor Valens, was a massive shock.
Showed the Roman army wasn't invincible anymore.
Definitely. And then you get these landmark events, Alaric and the Visigoths sacking Rome itself in 410.
Psychologically devastating, even if the city wasn't the political capital anymore.
Huge blow. Then the Vandals sack Rome again in 455. And finally, 476, the Germanic general Odoacer deposes the last Western emperor, a teenager named Romulus Augustulus.
The end point, symbolically at least. Why couldn't the military hold the borders?
Multiple reasons. Cost, for one. Maintaining that army drained the treasury. It was harder to recruit roaming citizens, partly due to population decline, partly lack of enthusiasm.
So they relied on mercenaries.
Increasingly, yes. They recruited heavily from the very barbarian groups they were fighting. These troops were expensive, and their loyalty was often questionable. Plus, emperors frequently pulled legions away from the frontiers to fight in civil wars, leaving borders exposed. And don't forget other factors. Climate change around this period might have spurred some migrations. And disease. Plagues like the Antonine Plague in the 2nd century had already weakened the population significantly. It all fed into this cycle of decline.
It really sounds like a perfect storm. So what was the immediate impact in the West after 476?
It varied quite a bit regionally, but generally you saw a breakdown of long-distance trade, a decline of cities, less security. In Britain, for instance, after the legions withdrew around 410, Roman life collapsed quite dramatically.
How so?
Skills were lost. They stopped making wheel-thrown pottery, stopped building in stone, currency disappeared. People basically went back to subsistence farming, maybe sheltering in the ruins of Roman villas. It really did become a post-Roman world quite quickly there.
Ushering in what people sometimes call the Dark Ages.
That term is loaded, but yeah, in Western Europe, there was certainly a period of fragmentation, reduced literacy, and loss of classical infrastructure.
But it wasn't uniform.
Oh, how is it different elsewhere?
In Italy, the Ostrogothic kingdom under Theodoric, who ruled after Odoacer, actually maintained many Roman institutions. They respected Roman law, kept the Senate going, repaired buildings. Life went on, albeit under new rulers.
So it wasn't a total wipeout everywhere. No. It was more of a transformation, a regional fragmentation of power. And some argue this fragmentation, this loss of a single centralized imperial control, might have actually, in the long run, spurred innovation and competition in Europe, freed it from an imperial monopoly, so to speak.
That's a fascinating thought. That decline could lead to unexpected positive outcomes later.
Potentially. It's complex. But it shows the fall wasn't just an end, it was also a beginning of something new.
Which leads us perfectly into our final segment, the eternal legacy. Even though the Western Empire collapsed, Rome's influence is far from gone, right?
Oh, absolutely not. Its impact is immense, woven into the fabric of Western civilization and beyond. Probably the most significant is Roman law.
How so?
The Romans were brilliant legal thinkers. Their system evolved over centuries. But the key moment for its legacy was in the 6th century CE, in the Eastern Empire, under Emperor Justinian.
The Justinian Code, or Corpus Juris Civilis.
Exactly. This massive compilation and rationalization of centuries of Roman law became the fundamental basis for the civil law systems used today in most of continental Europe, Latin America, and parts of Asia and Africa.
Even in common law countries like the US and UK, there's influence, isn't there? Lots of Latin legal terms.
Huge influence. Concepts we take for granted came from Rome. The idea of legal personality, that corporations can have rights like people, principles of contract law, factus sunt servanda, agreements must be kept, ideas about negligence or fault, culpa in tort law.
And even bigger ideas.
Their concept of ictus gentium, a law common to all peoples, was a precursor to international law. And ictus natural, natural law, evolved into ideas about universal human rights. What's crucial isn't just that they wrote these laws down, but that the texts were preserved, rediscovered in the Middle Ages, and provided this incredible, sophisticated framework for European legal development.
It's foundational. Okay, law. What about language? Latin seems obvious.
Very obvious. Latin was the language of the empire, administration, the military, and later the Western Church for centuries. While classical Latin died out as a spoken language, vulgar Latin, the everyday Latin spoken by people across the Western Empire, didn't disappear.
It evolved into
the Romance languages. French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, they are direct descendants.
And English. It's Germanic, but full of Latin words.
Hugely influenced. Estimates vary, but maybe 60% of English vocabulary has Latin roots, often coming in via French after the Norman conquest. It gives English its richness. Think of Germanic kingly versus Latin regal.
Or ask versus interrogate.
Exactly. Plus, countless prefixes, suffixes, scientific terms in biology and medicine, legal phrases like habeas corpus, pro bono, even abbreviations like EG and IE are Latin. And the literature, Cicero, Virgil, Ovid shaped Western thought for millennia.
Okay, law, language. What about the stuff we can see? Buildings, cities.
Roman architects and engineers were masters. They combined practicality with, often, a real sense of grandeur. Their use of the arch, the vault, and the dome allowed them to create huge interior spaces, like bathhouses, basilicas.
And the Pantheon in Rome, still standing, still breathtaking with that massive dome.
An engineering marvel. And the key wasn't just stone. It was their development of concrete opus scabamentitium.
Roman concrete. Heard it was incredibly durable.
Amazingly so. It was strong, flexible, could be molded, and crucially, could even set underwater. This let them build harbors, bridges, aqueducts on an unprecedented scale. It freed them from the limitations of just cutting stone.
And city planning, the famous Roman grid.
Centuriation, yeah. They often laid out new colonies and military camps on a grid system. Efficient, orderly. You can still see echoes of it in the street plans of cities founded by Romans and even in modern cities planned on a grid, like parts of New York or Barcelona. The Roman Forum, the public heart of the city, is the ancestor of our town squares.
And we still borrow their style, don't we? Government buildings, columns, domes.
All the time. Think of the U.S. Capitol buildings, state capitals, courthouses. Using Roman architectural language, columns, domes, pediments conveys a sense of authority, stability, permanence. It's deeply ingrained symbolism.
Right. And infrastructure beyond buildings, roads we mentioned, but also aqueducts.
Incredible hydraulic engineering. Aqueducts brought fresh water, often over huge distances, to supply cities, baths, fountains, essential for public health and allowing large urban populations. The Pont du Gard in France is just a stunning example.
Built to last.
And the roads, over 50,000 miles of paved roads across the empire. Vital for moving troops, goods, information. Some are still traceable, even used today. That durability, especially of their concrete, is something modern engineers still study.
So the big picture legacy, it's about practical solutions becoming enduring blueprints.
That's a great way to put it. They face the challenges of ruling a vast, complex territory, managing trade, maintaining public order and health, and they developed highly effective, often scalable solutions. Those solutions in law, language, engineering, governance formed a kind of toolkit that later civilizations picked up, adapted, and built upon.
It's an amazing journey we've covered. From this small city-state, through its almost self-destructive rise, its complex, drawn-out fall, and then this enduring, multifaceted legacy.
It really is. This deep dive shows, I think, not just history, but patterns. How societies grow, the stresses they face, how they adapt or fail to adapt.
And how their ideas and structures can long outlive the political entity itself.
Precisely. The story of Rome is just a constant reminder of how complex systems work, how they can break down, but also how they leave these deep, indelible marks on everything that follows. That appeal of Roman design, Roman law. So not just nostalgia, it reflects enduring human desires for order, stability, authority.
So here's something for all of you listening to think about. We've seen how Rome's greatest strength, its military machine, its vast interconnectedness, its very success also contained vulnerabilities, the seeds of its own problems.
Yeah, the paradox we talked about.
Right. So think about our own world today. Highly interconnected, technologically advanced, what might be the hidden vulnerabilities lurking within our greatest strengths? What lessons can Rome's long, complex story teach us about building societies that are truly resilient, built to last?
Something to chew on.
Definitely something to think about.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Tune in again.